when there are so much money at stake and two countries are so against one another, as the case with Israel and Iran, they'll throw anything they have to hurt each other.
Let's turn to the Middle East now. And Israel claims to have killed Hezbollah's head of money transfers in Syria. This, coupled with the overnight attacks on Al-Qard Al-Hasan bank branches across Lebanon, show a focus of Israeli forces to dismantle the Iran-backed militant group's operational capacity. The strikes took place hours before Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, arrived in Beirut to explore the possibility of a negotiated end to the war. Diplomacy has so far failed to ease the fighting and comes as the stakes have been raised following Israel's killing of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar. Meanwhile, Israel's security services say they've broken up a spy ring that was gathering information on behalf of Iran. 7 Israeli citizens from the country's north, including the city of Haifa, were arrested after an investigation by Shin Bet and police. Joining me now is Alex Vatanka, author and founding director of the Iran program at the Middle East Institute in Washington. Welcome to the program, Alex Vatanka. Can I ask you, first of all, how you view the significance of these new attacks across Beirut and what their impact will be on the financial sector?
Carol, it's great to be with you. Look, I mean, clearly the Israeli state and certainly Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his government are interested in going toward this decapitation strategy, if you like, against Hezbollah, in this case in Lebanon. But I think, broadly speaking, if they can get it done, they want to broaden that to go after every single member of the Iran-backed axis of resistance that are in the business, essentially, of fighting Israel. Now, as you just pointed out, the last set of Israeli actions have been targeting the financial activities of Hezbollah. So I assume what is happening here is that the decapitation strategy, if you will, is not just aimed at personnel, but also as the capacity of Hezbollah as an organization to operate. It is a state within a state in the country of Lebanon. A lot of people depend on Hezbollah for their livelihood. I assume still to this day, despite the massive amounts of damage that Israel's done to Hezbollah in the last few months, that the organization still has sort of a segment of population that it has to cater to, deliver for, and financial services part of that. So I think what the Israelis are doing is just to overall weaken, tighten, if you will, the noose around the neck of Hezbollah. Whether they'll succeed or not, obviously, is a slightly different matter, but that's what Israel's been doing from what I can tell.
Is there any sense of Hezbollah pulling back, retreating further back into Lebanon, or still continuing to fire weapons into Israel?
My reading just coming on just a few minutes ago was that Hezbollah has continued to fire rockets, saying that they're doing that in retaliation to Israeli strikes. And we have right now, again, as you pointed out, the Secretary of State of the United States, Tony Blinken, in the region. The Iranian Foreign Minister, Abbas Araghchi, is continuing his regional tour from last week. I understand he was in Bahrain and Kuwait. So both sides, the U.S. and Iran in this case, are still pushing for that ceasefire, if you will. How genuine these efforts are depends who you ask. But I certainly think I haven't changed my mind sitting here in Washington. The United States doesn't want to see that broader regional war. And I frankly don't think the Iranian regime is interested in that either. So the question is, what would it take for Israel to say, okay, we've won rounds, one round after another in recent months, maybe it's time for us to stop. Or perhaps they decide that, it's not enough, that they want to go and continue the strategy against the axis of resistance in the foreseeable future.
That is the biggest question, isn't it? What will draw this to a close? And we know that Antony Blinken, this is his 11th visit since the 7th of October. Peace plans have been talked about. We've thought that we were close and we weren't. Do you think that there's any difference this time?
To be honest, I mean, one of the criticism you can level at the door of this White House, the Biden presidency, is that they haven't really gotten the messaging right. So the United States looks weaker every time the U.S. promises a ceasefire and it doesn't happen. I don't know if it's going to be different this time around. Obviously, we're only a few weeks away from the U.S. election, so nothing major on the U.S. part is going to happen in the Middle East. But again, the Israelis will tell you they will do what they have to do from their national interest point of view. They're not going to sit here and wait for Washington. Again, that's their public messaging. But in reality, Israel has a lot to lose if there is too much distance between what they're doing and American support for them, because Israel obviously is much stronger facing its enemies when the United States has its back. And the question right now for Netanyahu is, what would it take for him to continue have this Biden administration's support in what they're doing towards their enemies in the acts of resistance?
And how do you assess the threat from the United States to perhaps put a limit on the amount of military aid sent to Israel if Netanyahu didn't allow more humanitarian aid into northern Gaza? Do you think that has worked as a threat from the United States, or is Benjamin Netanyahu just ignoring now the word that comes from the US and UK allies?
That's an important question here. Obviously, the United States is in a tough position because what is happening right now in Gaza and Lebanon is increasingly turning public opinion around the world also against the United States as the closest ally of Israel. So the U.S. is concerned about this. But at the same time, as we've heard from officials in the administration, Israel is simply too close of an ally, as it was put recently in a report quoting an official from the Biden administration, too close of an ally to withhold weapons to Israel. So, again, I think the United States has done a better job in terms of shaping Israel's decision-making when it comes to the mother of all battles, that against Iran. And there, the American side has made it very clear they're not interested in, for example, Israel going after Iran's nuclear facilities. For sure, the United States is not going to help that. We see much more of a proactive U.S. position when it comes to Israel going after that fight against Iran. Much less clarity in terms of really what U.S. position is when it comes to Hamas and the situation in Gaza.
Would you have expected some sort of response from Israel to Iran by now? And does it give you hope then that there has been a longer gap than expected between the strike from Iran and the expected response from Israel?
The Israelis are basically playing the same game that Iran played back in April. It took the Iranians about a month to retaliate after Israel struck their embassy in Damascus. If eventually that retaliation from Iran did come, it wasn't much of a success. I think the Israelis right now feel that perhaps, waiting and preparing a strike or retaliation against Iran that is strategically significant is important than just striking as fast as they can. Clearly, Israel has a capacity and has had plenty of time to prepare to strike Iran. The question for them is, what's the best kind of response to the latest round of Iranian missile attack on October 1st? And you just had in the United States intelligence reports, government intelligence reports being leaked in terms of what Israel's doing, ballistic missiles and so forth being planned to used against Iranian sites. The big question right now in Washington is who leaked it and why? Is this some kind of a orchestrated U.S. government, attempt to press the Israelis not to go ahead with some of their plans? Or something else is going on. But I will say this, Carolyn, that I think, obviously that Israeli retaliation will come. We just have to wait and see when it happens and what sort of shape it will take.
Interesting question you ask about who leaked highly classified US intelligence documents. Indeed, that is really a question. Just going back to the killing of Yahya Sinwar, the Hamas leader, that was regarded by so many people as a moment. But do you think it's shifted the dial at all?
Look, if you look at the totality of the history of this conflict, going back to the creation of the State of Israel in 1948, we've had so many rounds where significant members of what the Arab side, the Palestinians called resistance leaders, have been killed, have been taken out of the game by Israel, only to be replaced. So I'm not so sure if the death of Sinwar is going to be a game changer. I think somebody will come in and fill his shoes. The question is this the moment for Israel, for supporters of Israel and the region to sort of say, okay, this is a moment, this is an opportunity, let's have a ceasefire, let's quickly move ahead, deal with the problem of Islamist militants that believe every solution to every problem out there is militancy, the way the axis of resistance essentially believes. Let's fight that. But at the same time, let's seriously push ahead with the idea of a Palestinian state. Obviously, the Israeli society right now is wholly against the idea of a Palestinian state. But that is something that at some point needs to be introduced to prevent the future Yahya Sinwars of this world to be born.
And Benjamin Netanyahu, his popularity has risen and fallen in recent times, hasn't it? Now we hear a story that Israel's arrested 7 Israeli citizens on spying charges for Iran. How concerning do you think this will be to Benjamin Netanyahu, and to what extent does it reflect his popularity among Israelis?
Look, I don't think necessarily that's a reflection of what Israel, in terms of society, has in terms of views on the prime minister. He's got all sorts of other issues he has to deal with. This probably is not going to be one of them. I suspect, based on the reports I've seen, the individuals involved in this aren't doing this for ideological reasons. They're doing it for financial reasons. So essentially, opportunistic acts. That's not unheard of, obviously. Intelligence communities around the world do that. The money is used as an incentive. You recruit. The fact that Iran is able to do it more and more is somewhat a surprise. Israel is a pretty, in terms of security, pretty tight show. To give you an example, there's one international airport into the country. It's very difficult to sort of just walk into Israel, if you will, compared to Iran, where essentially borders are open. So I look at this set of reports and saying to myself, well, it obviously reflects an intensification of an Iranian desire to find recruits among the Jewish part of the Israeli population. That's happening. But how far they can continue going down this path, just using financial incentives, again, I don't think that that's going to be much of a pool that they can sort of draw from. And I think obviously now that the Israeli state is sort of awakened to this reality, the likes of Shin Bet, whose job it is to monitor counterintelligence operations, they'll be that much more watchful in terms of what's happening. But again, look, when there are so much money at stake and two countries are so against one another, as the case with Israel and Iran, they'll throw anything they have to hurt each other. And we're just seeing this happening in this new arena, the most recent area of competition, if you will, between the two sides.
Alex Vatanka, thank you so much for talking to us this evening. Alex Vatanka, founding director of the Iran program at the Middle East Institute in Washington and author of The Battle of the Ayatollahs in Iran, the United States foreign policy and political rivalry since 1979. Fascinating discussion there.